Have you ever struggled with trying to do all the things? Maybe you have a business and you're learning how to do marketing and sales and social media and email lists. And then you got kids and you got to worry about being their Uber driver, taking them everywhere, get them to do their homework. And then you're trying to focus on getting healthier. So you're working out, you're eating healthy, you're trying to meal prep, and then maybe you're still even working full time. Now, I got to say that when I was doing that, I was actually burning out fast. And the worst part was that I actually wasn't moving the needle forward in any way, despite how hard I was working. Then I picked up a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And Gary hit me with this first quote. He said, "You can become successful with less discipline than you think for one simple reason. Success is about doing the right thing, not doing everything right." I feel like Gary was the first person to give me permission to identify my one thing, lean in and do it the best that I could, and not feel pressured to do all the things at all. And once I understood the philosophies in the book and identified my one thing, it actually helped me make more money and impact in my business, made me able to spend more high-quality time with my family, and make my health and fitness a priority. That's why we created today's video, because we want to share what we did to find our one thing, what our biggest takeaways were from the book, to help you start taking things off your plate so you can start creating the life that you truly deserve. And if you're ready to do that with us, let's go. It's time to redefine leadership. Welcome to Modern Leadership, where we see things differently. Our channel is all about empowering entrepreneurs like you to achieve the next level of success in business and life. We believe that you can create a massive impact in the world without compromising your personal life or family time to do so.
We're committed to providing you with actionable tips and strategies weekly to make that possible. So if you're ready to become a modern leader and make a lasting difference in the world, consider subscribing. Turn on notifications and dive into our community. We want to thank you for being here because the world needs your leadership now more than ever. Let's go. So first off, can you kind of explain for people who don't know, what does the concept of the one thing mean to you in the context of like business and life?
So in terms of the context of the book, there's a lot of key quotes that I'm going to actually bring up as we kind of have this conversation, because they were things that like got me to start seeing things differently. One of the quotes that he says over and over and over in the book is, "What's the one thing I can do such by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary?" And it's kind of like one of these things of like, I know we talk about prioritization, right? A lot about identifying what the most important things are. Because at the time, like I was doing everything and I was trying to do everything exceptionally well. And basically that made it so that I did nothing well. And being able to identify, like actually figuring out what you can become the best in the world at, or what you love doing, or what, makes the time fly by, or people come and ask you about, is really going to help you like lean in, but also create more results in less time. Now, another quote that he has is he says, "Success demands singleness of purpose. You need to be doing fewer things for more effect instead of doing more things with side effects. And it is those who concentrate on but one thing at a time who advance in this world." And I really just think it's like when it comes down to logic, you only have a certain amount of time and energy to put into things. Right. And so when you can put that into the things that you are really good at, your strengths, the things that are actually moving the needle, it'll prevent you from doing all those other things, which we term as life coaches like buffering, where you're just taking action thinking that it's moving the needle forward, but it's really not. Now, I want to ask you the second question, and that is like, how do you prioritize your tasks and goals to identify your one thing in both professional and personal life? Because you are like the prioritization queen, right? But I know early on we were struggling with that stuff. So I'm curious, like, how do you prioritize those tasks?
Yeah, I really had to start off with reframing my mind and really focusing on, well, what is the most important things for me, right? Because for me, as a mom especially, everything was a priority for me. Like I had to take care of everything, but that's not possible. There's always things that you can prioritize. And he does have this other quote here in the book. It is not that we have too little time to do all the things we need to do. It is that we feel the need to do too many things in the time that we have. Mm-hmm. So for me, I thought, well, I have all of these things that I need to do on my list, and they all need to be done by me as well. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, I can't do that. I'm human and I only have like enough brain capacity and energy to be able to do the things that I want to do. So I really had to hone in on the most important things.
Yeah, I know we talk a lot about like some things matter more than others. That's kind of like a universal principle that us as life and performance coaches is we realize that there's some things that move the needle the most, and there's some things that feel like it's moving, but it's moving just a fraction, right? Now, in the book, he talks about this being the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, which basically says that 20% of your actions produce 80% of the results in that specific area. And 80% of your actions produces the remainder 20%, the stuff that's left over. So I'm sure that people can think about what are the things in your business that move the needle forward the most. But I also want you to think about this related to like your family and things like that, right? So I know we talk about this where a lot of times people feel like what moves the needle the most is just being present with their kids, right? Like doing all the normal chores and stuff and just having, being there at home with them. But when you really think about it, probably the 20% activities, I know they are for us, is when we're playing a board game, we're having a conversation, or we're one-on-one having, a walk or doing something like that. Even just like watching TV, I feel like that's the 80%. It's the 80% that we do that only produces 20% of the results because we're not talking, we're not having deep conversation, and we're not like really connecting as a family. And so when you think about that, you're like, what if I removed a lot of that 80% stuff and just kept as much as I could of the 20%? Now, there's going to be things you can't eliminate, right? You just can't always be there with your kids doing everything that you want with the kids. Otherwise, you're going to go like crazy being able to like, how am I going to be able to do all this? But in reality, when you think about like, but how could I spend more time doing the 20% activities and then releasing the pressure from the rest of them? That's how you identify what that one thing is. And you can think about this related to your business. You can think about it related to your health goals. You can think about it related to your family. It's like, what are the things that matter most? Those are the things to double down on, and everything else either outsource or eliminate or just kind of like bless and release.
Yeah. And that really goes into the next quote in the book where he says, focus is a matter of deciding what things you're not going to do. So that is also important to decide what it is that you're going to get rid of.
Yeah. A lot of people do that. They, in us included, especially before we understood how our brain works, is like we would think about like, what are all the activities we have to do? But one of the things that you can do as a powerful leader is get people to identify what they can stop doing. How does it feel when you get told like, hey, this thing, like it's actually not moving the needle. Let's actually get you to stop doing that. Most people don't do that. They're like, if they're bosses, they're like, here's additional work for you to take on. They don't go, hey, I want you to take on this additional work, so I'm going to remove this from your plate, right? Because that would feel amazing. And I want you to be that kind of leader, but really it's tapping into like some things matter more than others. And so if you want to value your own time and you want to get more stuff done in your business, then you probably, if you have somebody working with you, you want to make sure that they're also identifying their 20%.
Okay, so can you share an example of a time when focusing on the one thing led to like really amazing progress and success for you?
Yes. So my one thing is coaching, is asking questions and getting curious. It wasn't for a long time. I mean, I didn't know what my one thing was. So I was just trying everything in the world, which is okay in the beginning, right? You're like, I don't know what my one thing is, but I'm going to do something. I'm not going to just think about like, oh, what's my one thing? Trying to think about it in my brain, right? And so I was doing all the things. I was learning stuff about business, about sales, about Facebook, about connecting with my kids, about all of these kind of things. And the thing that really opened the door for me was coaching. And really it's about understanding how the subconscious mind works, how I can create connection and ask people questions to identify what's holding them back so I can help them write their brain, their subconscious mind, to get them into creating more of what they want versus what they don't want. Now that was one thing that when I dove into it, helped me in multiple different areas. It made me better at sales. It made me better at getting people testimonials and getting results, right? Helped me better at becoming a better father so I can hear what the kids are saying and getting to see it from their perspective, right? Helped me become better at being a husband. It helped me become better at being a police officer. It's why I rose up the rank to sergeant, right? It's because I got better at being able to communicate, but not having like my own preconceived notions or thoughts about it affect the actual situation. It was more like I can ask really great questions to see it from the other person's perspective. What's awesome is when you can see it from their perspective, they're more open to seeing it from yours. So that's what I would have to say is like, that is something that has continued to give me back time and time again. And what I find is like when I'm struggling in an area, it's because I'm not leaning into that one thing again, right? It's like I want to become better with a puppy, for example, which, by the way, thank goodness he's not here. He's usually running around. And anytime that we have a microphone, he likes to bark or growl or do all this kind of stuff. But like, if I'm like getting emotionally upset because of the puppy, then I'm not practicing my skill of coaching. And it's like, that's my one thing. If I can control that, if I can lean into that, everything else becomes like he says, easier and unnecessary, right? And so that's me getting back into it, but sometimes I do get distracted from it. So that's definitely something that I want to bring up. I want to ask you the next question, though, is how do you stay focused and avoid distractions when working towards your one thing? Because the truth is, there's going to be a million different distractions, a million different shiny objects that are going to go, no, but this thing over here might be the thing. Oh, but maybe you can work on branding. Oh, but maybe you could work on this. And it's this shiny object where your one thing changes so often, you don't give it enough time to actually be able to become fruitful. So what would you say to that?
Yeah. And this is where the most important things come back, right? What are the most important things? When you truly know what the most important things are, then it gets easier to stay focused and avoid distractions, because you'll know they're distractions because they don't align with what your most important things are.
Yeah. I like to think about this also as core values. It's like the things that are like near and dear to you that might be different for other people. I remember in the book, he was talking about imagine that you're juggling balls, all right? And you have 5 different balls. Let's say your values are work, family, health, friends, and integrity. And so you're juggling these balls. He said, you have to realize that there's some balls that are like rubber, like the work one. If you drop the work one for a little bit, like it generally will bounce back up. It's one of those things where you're not going to say something or do something and completely ruin that forever, right? But there's other balls like your health, other balls like your family, where if you drop them, it's going to get scuffed. It's going to potentially get broken. There's going to be other repercussions that you may never, ever come back from again. And so it's basically looking at these priorities and going, okay, what is the things that is most important to me? And is that a glass ball or is that a rubber ball? Because if it is, what he talks about is like reflecting every week, which is what we do with our one-on-one clients, right? And also what we do for ourselves is like going back and asking ourselves, like, what did we do really, really well? Like, what are we proud of this week? And then if we could do this week all over again, what would we do differently? This is that opportunity to go, oh, you know what? I kind of dropped that glass ball. Let me make sure that I pick it up this next week. So it's not something that happens on repeat, right? Because a lot of times we don't take the time to slow down every week to be able to do that. But being able to do those site corrections is so important.
Yeah, before it's too late. So what strategies do you use to determine what your one thing could be in different areas of your life?
So take a guess, people. I kind of already have said it. Coaching is the hat that I see everything. So you better believe I'm going to be asking you some questions, all right? So I have a list of 5 different questions, and I just want to see what comes up for you. Remember, there's an exploratory process where we think about some of these things, and then there's the doing process, which is just go out there and do and see if that thing is that 20%, the thing that moves the needle the most. I know we want to theoretically figure it out in our brain before we actually do it, but it never can actually be perfect, or you can't perfect anything until it's out in the world, right? Because we get better by doing, right? Not just by thinking of doing. So a couple of things is, what are some things that move the needle the most for you in that specific area? So if we're thinking about business, what are the things that move the needle the most for you? When you think about health, what are the things that moves the needle the most for you? This is a good question to ask, because then you can identify what's most important and what's not. Number 2 is, what comes easy for you? So what comes easy for you? Meaning it's like, there's some people who come to me and they go, how are you doing that? It's so easy. I'm like, it's just how I do it, right? But there's something about that because it's based off of my strengths and maybe potentially their weaknesses, right? Third one is, what seems to make the time fly by? Some of you guys have this where it just feels like, oh, this takes forever. And that's probably one of the things you want to outsource, right? Mm-hmm. But some of the things you'll wake up, you'll start doing a YouTube video, you'll look up, it's 2 hours later, and Teresa's like, hey, Mark, maybe we should stop the YouTube video now. But it's because it's something that I love doing, that is my one thing, but I also get lost in it sometimes. So from that, I'm like, oh, this must be an indicator that this could include a part of my one thing because I love doing it so much. Next one is, what do people look to you for advice or help on? Like might have a lot of people who reach out to you and go, hey, I really love to get healthy, or I really like to, be a better father, or be a better husband, or work on anger, or things like that, right? And so when you realize that that's what people bring you, it's often because that's a skill and that's your one thing. You don't even realize, right? Because you're too close to the problem, right? Like they say, you can't read the label when you're inside the box, right? And it's something that in this book really was an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, I really like coming to you for leadership questions, or making decisions. Like, this is a really tough decision, and you normally know like how to see it from the other person's perspective, and getting questions that I could ask that can help me decide better. So
and that's a really good point. I mean, like when you think about that, what she's kind of saying is she taps into her team, which happens to be her husband, to find out his strengths and to utilize his strengths for her. It's the same with us, like Kurt, like who's editing this video. He has some really powerful strengths. I'm going to lean into him whenever he has any ideas for videos or way of editing or anything like that, right? I mean, even this video is a little bit different than our normal ones because he gave me some feedback, and I really trust and believe and know like who he is and also what his like goal is with these videos. And I love when he gives me feedback like that, right? So it's using everybody else's strengths because they're going to be using yours, and that's the power of a team. All right, the last question is, what is something that I could do better than anyone else in the world? Sometimes that is your one thing.
Okay, so have you ever had to pivot or adjust your one thing based on like changing circumstances or kind of like new information that you've gotten?
Yes. And I don't know if it was necessarily changing it, but like I actually identified it, right? So in the beginning, like I said, I was taking action and trying to figure out what my one thing was, right? So there were some stages. The first stage was I was doing everything. And I was like putting as much energy and effort that I could into burning out, not doing anything really well. I read this book, and the book helped me to like start to see some potential things that could be my one thing. And so I started to lean into those things. And yes, I did produce more results because it was the 20% activities, but I noticed that I didn't love it. I noticed that I didn't really come to light when I was doing that thing, right? And I'm not saying you have to love everything you do, because you don't, right? But also it kind of felt like, I don't want to like grow a business so that I can leave my full-time job and actually hate my business, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to like lean into that, I was like, let me just continue to make some adjustments. And so I was just making adjustments until I found my one thing, which is the coaching, right? And when I did that, I think I said this a little bit earlier, but sometimes I still find myself getting off track with that. I find myself like trying to use a different tool. And I'm like, no, that is the tool that I could do best than anybody in the world. I mean, it's the reason why I have a life coach certification where I teach it, because I really feel comfortable with it. I do it so much automatically that it kind of like builds up that skill and makes it feel like I'm just kind of like on autopilot. It just happens automatically. So I do find myself getting off track with it, and I do have to pivot back to it. But it's usually when I'm getting frustrated. It's usually when I'm putting in action and energy and I'm not seeing a lot of results, is I have not used that tool to not only make more impact, but also to like really be able to help me through that situation. Because it's kind of like the whole thing of like, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right? Mm-hmm. For me, everything is coaching. And if I try to get off track of that, I'm like trying to screw in a screwdriver with a hammer, right? And it's not really that helpful. So the quicker that I get back into it, the better.
So what advice would you give to someone who is like struggling to identify their one thing and kind of prioritize effectively?
Really great question. So I would say a couple things. Number one is definitely pick up Gary Keller's book. So the one thing really did help me identify it. Number two is to start taking action, right? To start taking action while you're in the process of figuring it out. Like, it's not one of those things where you have to be figured out before you take action. Read the book. I mean, literally, you guys just have like a huge summary right here. Like, maybe you don't even need to read the book, but it's just a process of like really thinking about it, identifying what those most important activities and priorities are, and then executing on it and seeing what your one thing is in that area, right? Yeah. Now, here's one thing that people could get stuck with, and that is like actually getting themselves to take action.
Yeah.
And that's really why I made the next video for you. It's from Stephen Covey. This is where he talks about the most effective habit. Now, you know, Stephen Covey is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is the one that we have found to make the biggest impact, to get us to continue taking action and really help us identify our one thing. So definitely tap the screen and check out that video. And if you don't know yet, we also have a business book club that we actually run for free right now. And we read powerful books like The One Thing and like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If that's something you're interested, I'll leave you the information in the show notes. It's completely free, but this is something we do for our community to be able to help dive in and do summaries just like we do here, to be able to help them to maximize their growth, not only in their personal life, but in their business.